Hello, I'm Don Mitchell. Today I'll be talking to you once again about Business Basics, the book that allows you to be a vastly more effective leader of a nonprofit or for-profit enterprise by cutting costs in dramatic ways, which has been our focus now for several lessons. Today I'll be looking at lesson 33, in which we look at how reducing the time needed to manage your enterprise is a critical input to being more effective, especially in pursuing just the minimum business model. So as always, I'd love to quote from the Bible here to begin. This case, we'll be quoting from Luke chapter 12, verses 25 through 31 in the New King James Version. And I quote, "And which of you, by worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? If you then are not able to do the least, why are you anxious for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, and yet I say to you, even Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so clothes the grass, which today is in the field, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you should eat, or what you should drink, nor have an anxious mind. For all these things the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knows that you need these things. But seek the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added to you." In this lesson, we look at how simplifying management to develop the minimum business model reduces costs for enterprise and its stakeholders. As background for simplifying management, please read the article that appeared in the January 1st, 2009 issue of Inc. magazine, describing plentyoffish.com and its founder, Marcus Friend, F-R-I-N-D. To wit, Marcus Friend was determined to create a business that could be simply, easily, and quickly managed by him. Because staring at a computer screen gave Mr. Friend eye strain, he tried to minimize that aspect of his work. Since he wrote and maintained all the software as well as ran the company, his businesses had to be very simple, and he made it that way. As a result, he reported being done with work in just 10 minutes on many days. In most cases, minimizing the time of the person running the business will dramatically reduce costs for how the enterprise and its stakeholders experience. If you focus on minimizing leadership time, I think you'll be amazed at how low you and your shareholders' costs can go. Let me share a personal example. When I started Mitchell & Company, I was advised to devote about 15 hours a week to seeking new consulting clients. Initially, I did more than that, spending every waking hour that wasn't devoted to billable work and any kind of marketing I could imagine. As the firm grew, I kept doing the same thing, except that I also developed endless lists of marketing tasks for my colleagues to do. As a result, it wasn't unusual for the firm to devote hundreds of hours a week to marketing, even when we were quite small. Years after the firm was well established, I began to think in terms of how I wanted to spend my days. I developed personal goals that included lots more family activities, vacations, holidays, learning experiences, and bonding with friends. As a result, I had fewer than 15 hours a week for all my work. Naturally, I had to cut back a lot on the time I spent on marketing. Without any intention to do so, I also cut back on the money spent on marketing and and the time that my colleagues invested. In consequence, our marketing costs declined by over 90%, while our growth and profitability improved. I was surprised by that result. What was the difference? We only worked on marketing activities that were very high payoff and cost very little. For instance, I would only visit a potential client if there was a large project under discussion, and I was going to be within 20 miles of their offices for some other purpose. Someone in our office would telephone the CEO and CFO to ask if either one wanted me to stop by to discuss the potential project. If the answer was yes, I went. If no, I didn't go. I also learned to substitute technology for many marketing trips and often employed video conferences to make substantial marketing presentations. Although it cost a great deal in those days to run an hour-long video conference, the expense was generally less than 20% of the cost to visit the people and typically involved less than 5% of my time. As a result of my new approach, I also redesigned our consulting processes so they would take less of my time. In this streamline, I often eliminated major consulting activities that formerly took a lot of my time but didn't seem to help clients. In other areas, I reduced my time involved by making critical decisions early in the project rather than waiting until the end to review what my colleagues had done. As a result, the work that everyone else had to do also declined. For every hour of project time I personally saved, my staff saved 50 to 100 hours. Eventually, I designed new processes that totally replaced the need for many staff members. The new procedures speeded up the work while improving its accuracy and helpfulness. As a result, I also became more familiar with the details and provided better advice to clients. Naturally, such simplifications are easier to do if you have a small business and are content to keep it small. A better plan is to seek ways to create substantial business and to have it grow while keeping your personal time involvement quite limited. Otherwise, your costs will be small in absolute terms, but could be quite a large percentage of a small revenue base. A better approach is to shrink costs while continually expanding revenues. Here are some principles that can help you. First, identify large, high-value needs that organizations and individuals are unable to satisfy from any existing sources. In my case, one such need was for a company's stock to be higher priced without improving the company's earnings and cash flow from what they would normally be. Most CEOs and CFOs thought they knew how to accomplish such a stock price improvement by simply making optimistic promises of future performance based on all their new activities working perfectly. Such executives were usually fired after performance badly lagged their promises or they were caught making fraudulent financial reports. My clients were honest people who wanted to tell investors what was likely to occur and to gain more understanding and approval for what they were actually accomplishing. I could help them by aligning their plans more closely with what investors were looking for and were finding hard to obtain. Second, locate ways of getting paid that don't cause customers or beneficiaries much pain. Public companies could charge my fees and expenses directly to any completed capital transactions that I had studied for them. As a result, payments to Mitchell and Company were only charged to the balance sheet rather than to the profit and loss statement, the primary measure used for determining their executive bonuses. As you can imagine, company leaders really like that. Wealthy individual clients usually arrange for me to draw commissions or to receive finder's fees from sponsors of any opportunities they invested in. As a result, they never had to write me a check, despite paying nothing extra for their investments. 3. Find a low-cost method of filling such a need that doesn't require much of your own time. In the field of corporate finance, people spin lots of theories about how financial markets work. In reality, such markets often act much differently than what the theories assert. I simply employed standard decision-making methods to cross-check at least 3 independent sources of data. Typically, the sources were answers to hypothetical questions during investor interviews, historical patterns evaluation, case histories or results experienced by companies with similar investors in similar circumstances, and then create a stock price forecast based on our experiences in such forecasting. Once we have the necessary data, I can make the forecast in 20 minutes. 4. Keep your methodology secret so no competitors can duplicate or improve on it. I designed a stock price forecasting methodology that included several key elements known only to me. No one else ever saw all the calculations I used, so they didn't know how I went from the data to the results. The process was complicated enough that you couldn't reverse engineer it. As a result, my method is just as proprietary today as when I developed the initial version in 1976. Build your reputation so you can add customers that benefit more. And this would also apply to beneficiaries and end users. Done properly, you may be able to charge more for doing similar work because you're delivering a great deal more in total value. For example, if the total stock market value of some client is larger initially, expanding value by the same percentages for a company with a smaller market capitalization provides more financial rewards for investors. As a result of such thinking, you too can expand your business size while shrinking costs as you squeeze out the time you spend managing your business and making it better. A good way to start is by examining the economic payoffs of how you spend your time now. Locate the most productive 1% of what you do and seek to make everything you do even more productive than that 1% while working a great deal less. With that perspective in mind, let's go on to consider a minimum business model. I find that most entrepreneurs don't think much about such business models. In fact, many entrepreneurs prefer to think about how many people they can employ and how busy those people can be kept. Actually, such a people-intensive business model will have lots of added costs unless employees pay you for the opportunity to work with you. I first learned about minimum business models after becoming interested if you could have a one-person corporation bring in more than $1 billion in annual revenues. I expected that most people would believe that such an accomplishment was impossible. Instead, I found that virtually all experts I contacted agreed it was possible, and many provided examples of what had been done in the past or could be done in the present. Peter Drucker told me about the first such business that he had found, a Swiss investment bank owned and operated by a man who spent most of his day on the telephone introducing those who needed capital to those who had money to invest. The banker's fees were about 5% of the sums invested, and he raised tens of billions of dollars a year. As a result, the bank's revenues, against which it had almost no expenses, were over $1 billion a year. So let's examine this example more closely to understand how it worked. You and I could sit in our offices, make many telephone calls offering to place capital, asking to access capital. Everyone who couldn't raise enough capital would be delighted to speak with us. Those who wanted to invest and already had more deals than they could look at would be politely unavailable. Those who could easily raise capital would not so politely ignore us. We would have no revenues by operating in this way. Clearly, the Swiss investment banker must have had access to some very attractive deals that made investors substantial sums of money. Unless you had once worked for a large successful investment bank and provided many high-quality deals while there, it takes a while to develop such a clientele. I don't know this banker's employment history, but I suspect he may have had such experience. If we think about this gentleman's success, we can guess that he probably began with a more complex and expensive business model than the one we are suggesting. How might such business success be accomplished instead by using a simple, inexpensive business model? I raise this question for two purposes. First, to provide an idea that you may want to implement. Second, to provide a template that might apply to another business opportunity. Before reading the rest of this lesson or listening to me, I encourage you to write down all of your ideas for duplicating the investment banker's success with a simple, inexpensive business model. I provide that encouragement because you'll learn a lot more from this lesson if you attempt to find your own solutions. The more time you spend in this way, the more valuable the lesson will become for you. Have you written your ideas? Good. Let's now look at the subject together. Think for a minute about what kind of successful deals would probably come to such an investment banker. If the company needing capital were well known, had a stellar balance sheet, and generated lots of cash, the company would have undoubtedly saved money by holding an auction among 20 investment banks that wanted to find investors. That's what the Tennessee Valley Authority, often called the TVA, did in the 1990s to raise more capital. Because it was an agency of the U.S. government, owning the TVA's bonds was low risk, and the organization used that advantage to spend less for raising capital. What else can we conclude about the client company that was looking for capital? The client probably didn't want a lot of publicity or to make much disclosure. Otherwise, the deal would have been shopped around the globe to all the potentially interested parties. Swiss investment banks have an above-average reputation for secrecy, and a one-person investment bank would be in a position to keep secrets better than a larger one. So we can assume that these were hush-hush deals for some reason. Since such an investment bank isn't going to be able to do much on-the-ground due diligence, either the deal doesn't need that kind of examination, or the company providing the capital is prepared to find its comfort in something else. Here's an example of what I mean. If you need money to finance a project in a famously unstable country, everyone knows that it's risky doing business there. But if the project's customers agree to deposit enough money into a Swiss escrow account to cover the first 10 years of their purchases, the capital provider can comfortably agree to fund a project after placing a lien on the escrow account that puts him or her ahead of the customer's claims. The investment bank's client and the project's customers have already agreed to such an arrangement. It's simple to raise the money. Despite this low risk in practice, the client company doing the project might not want any publicity due to potentially negative political ramifications in the famously unstable country from the fancy details becoming known. By looking into how such hush-hush deals might be done, it becomes clear what role a single investment banker can play. So see how he can structure deals so they will be attractive to a wide group of confidential capital providers. You don't need a big staff to develop such structures. After all, the details for putting the deal together are going to be worked out by some of the best independent international lawyers and accountants. Who can provide such confidential capital? Well, it has to be someone or entity that's not regulated. It doesn't have to disclose where its money goes. Such investors are often high-risk managers of private capital pools that don't borrow money to leverage their deals. You can pull out a list of the world's wealthiest people from Forbes and begin thinking about who fits this profile. There will be about 30 names that will strike you as being a good fit. What do you do next? You telephone such people and organizations to inquire what kind of deals they're looking for. Chances are they'll send you a list of requirements by email. If they don't, you can just look up any past public transactions and draw a profile from those deals. If you have detailed questions after being able to articulate what the person or organization appears to be looking for, someone will usually answer you. Then the fun begins. You think of trustworthy industries, companies, and people needing money that would probably prefer to keep the details of the funding secret. After you identify some such prospects, think of a structure that potential investors would be glad to use, such as my theoretical example of having project customers put money to an escrow account in Switzerland to secure transactions in a risky country. Then you contact those who probably need funds to see if they would like to hire you on a contingent fee basis to put together deals. Most won't, some will. Sign contracts to represent the ones who hire you and develop term sheets describing the deals they want to do. Then go to those whose investment criteria match what you put together on the term sheet. Some may be interested, or none may be. Find out why some or all aren't not interested, then either work with your client to adjust the deal to make it more appealing, or develop a totally different type of deal that capital providers like better. Keep repeating this process and eventually have a business like the one Peter Drucker described to me. Okay, so let's say that you don't want to establish such an investment bank. The same thought process applies to the business you do want to establish, with one exception. Imagine that the $1 billion one-person business already exists, and then work backward to figure out under what conditions such a success could develop. Here's an example. Let's assume you wanted to head up a bank with fee revenues over $1 billion from providing capital to entrepreneurial startups in your country. Let me outline the questions this approach creates about its ideal origins. First, why do startup entrepreneurs come to this bank rather than somewhere else? Second, where does the bank get the capital to fund the startups? Third, why don't the bank's competitors steal all this lucrative business? Four, why doesn't the bank need more than one employee? Fifth, why will regulators allow this kind of capital provision? And sixth, how can the risk of loss be reduced to very low levels? I encourage you to answer these questions as an exercise for developing or thinking about business models. And if you want to contact me with my email at askdonmitchell@yahoo.com, I'll be glad to share my reactions to your solutions and give you credit for any ideas I include in my future writing and speaking. So what's the key cost reducing point about reducing management time to develop the minimum business model? You can apply a zero-based analysis to create 2,000% cost reduction solutions that will expand your profits after implementation to reducing the amount of time you spend managing your enterprise by revising your business model to meet just the minimum best practice while providing the minimum core offering to help you and your stakeholders to reduce costs by more than 96% or increase social benefits by more than 20 times of what you will be spending. So I have some assignments here for you. The first one is, what large market where you think like as customers and employees could you serve that needs better performance? Second, how are the needs of the largest and potentially most profitable customers in that market different from the other customers? Three, how little time could you spend and still provide a much improved offering for the most attractive customers? Four, how can you keep your methods secret? Fifth, how can you easily expand your reputation so potentially more profitable customers will want your offerings? Six, how can you reduce by more than 85% the time and expense of gaining a new customer? Seven, identify 10 one-person business models that attract you. 8, examine each alternative one-person business model to consider what the cost, profit, and cash flow potentials are by evaluating A, what you can charge, B, how many customers will be attracted, C, how well each business model will probably perform, D, how large the organization's revenues can grow by using each business model, and E, what proprietary knowledge advantages you will gain, how you will be able to employ such advantages. And 9, consider the difficulty of implementing these 10 alternatives. 10, look at the risk involved if any activity doesn't turn out well. 11, select one minimum business model to develop on a part-time basis. So I hope you find this whole area as exciting, interesting, and intriguing, really, as I do. And I look forward to having the potential to actually study your business someday and write about it. So Please share the details of your successes as you do. So, but in the meantime, before you come back for the next lesson, may God bless you, your family, and all you do. In the name of Jesus. Goodbye for now.